Hey guys, Tarke here, and I want to do a video covering the rebalancing that GG has announced they'll be doing in the next patch. Now, I will be going through the 3 updated uniques and going through all the previous leagues that I think they'll be updated items from, and talk about the ones which I think may have some potential for seeing in the future. There'll also be a bonus video following this one, which will be a bonus video following this one. Anyway. So off the bat, this is focusing on league exclusive uniques. I'll have a link to this original thread down below, but I'm going to breeze through these items because we have all this stuff to do later. So from what we know, they will only be league exclusive, and the end they say that there are many other league exclusive uniques that have undergone similar changes. For full details, keep an eye out. So these are just 3, there will be more. So off the bat, gifts from above. What they've done to it is they've added cast level 10 Consecrate when you deal a critical strike. And the big thing that everyone really cares about, 50% increased damage while on consecrated ground, 5% additional block chance while on consecrated ground. Yeah, this is now a very powerful item. This has a boatload of crit strike on there. If you think about the base crit strike this goes up to, the crit strike on the ring itself, the fact you get the consecrated ground, okay, that isn't that great, but 50% increased damage and 5% additional block chance, this is very, very powerful. And that is global block chance, not block chance with shields, so you can do silly stuff like bow block builds. Troll Timber. Troll Timber was literally a troll item, which now actually has some use. If you read through it, it gives some armor, who cares, a little bit of life, who cares, 0.5% of life regen, not too shabby, it's decent, 15% increased air effects for skills used by totems, that is very powerful, but most importantly, 0.5% of damage dealt by your totems is leached to you as life. Now, obviously, for something like Ancestral Warchief Totems, this isn't as good because you can't do two-handers with it. You could use this with Face Breakers. You could do this with, like, Varanastra or something silly. But this, I think, will mostly see a place in life-based cast totem builds. You could still use this in a CI build just to get Leech because the Leech is so powerful. But, yeah, really powerful. This will definitely see some use. I like that you can use it at such a low level. This is actually a pretty legitimate item now, and the fact that it gives you insane amounts of utility through the leech and the AoE, and it also has some flat life and it has some regen, like, it definitely has uses there. And I like that it's on a bad base for energy shield builds. This is definitely a nice little nudge for life. That being said, it isn't amazing for life builds. Now, this is the one that really surprised me, and they go into their details of it, but the main thing is they took an item which they admit was already good, and they made it even better. So they get, we know this is a good item. They say, this is a good item, but we want it to be like a chase item. And the fact that they're making items into chase items, and they still like having this upper echelon of chase items, to me is pretty interesting. So, max energy shield base, cool, a lot of int, that's usual. Right ring slot, you cannot regen mana. Right ring slot, 3% of energy shield regen per second, very powerful. Right ring slot, 100 flat maximum mana. Left ring slot, so you either have it clicked in the right or the left if you didn't know about this item before. You cannot recharge or regen energy shield. 40 mana regen per second. That is just a flat 40 mana regen per second. Add 100 to maximum energy shield. This is fucking amazing. Imagine a crazy world where you're playing a CI build, okay? We're imagining it. Now imagine a crazy world where you're playing a Vol Pact-centric CI build, where you don't care about regen because you're just a leech build. This is amazing. Not only does it give you a ridiculous amount of energy shield, getting upwards of like 120 energy shield just on a ring, it also gives you 40 base mana regen, and yeah, this is definitely an interesting items, and the fact they're going to this level of power makes me very excited for the potential of other possible power levels. So, with that in mind, let's go into what I think is the more interesting bit of what we speculate will be changed. We've opened up all the new leagues. I went back from Horrendous. I doubt they're going to be updating Essence and Prophecy League items. So let's jump to Tempest. So, we've already seen Troll Timber. Now, Black Steel, they could make it a really cool animate weapon. It's not the first thing that would spring to mind, but then again, neither was Troll Timber or the Ring. So, there's potential for it. Maybe they will make a super Black Steel. But if you look at all of these other items, these are items which can be put into quite a big variety of builds. They're not that niche. Even Chavirons, which is a like niche item, can be used in quite a few different builds. Troll Timber has a lot of use, and Gifts from Above has a lot of use. So I wouldn't expect too many niche items to get a straight transfer over. Okay. That being said, Crown of the Pale King, I also don't expect to see much use because it is just very, very niche in the way it works. Is this weird like reflect helmet? That not so much. Now, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this. This is an item that I've always thought was very interesting, and it's something that I've always kind of wanted to build around, but it's just a pain in the ass to get hold of in temporary leagues, and I play temporary leagues. Adds a bunch of flat lightning damage to spells and attacks, a very large amount, may I add. Increased energy shields, some lightning res, 10% chance to curse enemies with a random curse on hit. That, in my mind, is actually a bad thing. And 5% chance to create shocked ground when hit. That's just pretty cool. I think this is potentially a very fun item, which is completely gone off the radar, and if it became accessible again, it would be cool. This would be the kind of thing that would be fun to play with. This is the kind of thing I would like to see added back into the game with a new bit of life. Now, basically any one of these rings could be buffed because they just don't see any use whatsoever. And a lot of this turns into you can't really do one of these rings without doing all of them in my mind, because it's the thing of we have a shock ring, an ignite ring, and a freeze ring. So if they did one, they kind of have to do all of them. To make these powerful, you would have to do a lot to them in my opinion. So just to briefly go through them. Fizz damage to frozen enemies, that's already pretty niche. Add some cold damage to attacks, some flat evasion, reduce chill duration, chance to freeze. Cold is so weak that you would have to add a lot of chance to freeze, because the few builds which still freeze are crit based and they don't need chance to freeze. So you'd have to add a lot of chance to freeze to make this viable in non-crit based cold builds, but who's even playing that, right? Because of that, I think it's unlikely unless they just make these super powerful. Some strength, some flat fire damage, life gain for each ignited enemy. That's potentially could be very defensive if they made it super powerful. Increased ignite duration, chance to ignite. This could be made interesting if it became a very good defensive item. And if the only thing they changed was this, it could probably see use having to make the rest of it too insane. Increased damage against shocked enemies. Increased lightning damage. Max mana. 0.2% of damage leeches life against shocked enemies. Chance to shock. They could make the leech on this more powerful. How the making a leech more powerful is kind of a sketchy the current state of the game where people are so anti-leech. I think the main thing you would do to this would be make it a more offensive item, because again, lightning is kind of a weak element at the moment. It's very easy to just shock things anyway, so I think with this, touching the leech value is scary. So the main thing to do would be either crazy buff the chance to shock, in which case you do it with all three of them, but mostly just buff up the damage mods. Beyond. Now, Beyond is an interesting one. The Harvest is already powerful enough, it doesn't need any changes. The Darkseer is kind of powerful enough, they could make it insane, doesn't need any changes. Edge of Madness is like that troll item that everyone has tried to at some point make a build around, but it's basically just an MTX. This would be so cool. If they made this good, it would be insane. They could just like increase the numbers of things, just increase all the numbers. Increased chaos damage per level, increase just like double numbers, just double everything on the weapon, and even then it would be I don't know, maybe they could increase the flat chaos damage on it, they can increase the flat fizz damage on it. I would really like to see Edge of Madness. Please do something with Edge of Madness. You don't need to make these two any better. Maybe if you want them to be tier 0, but please Edge of Madness, that would be really fun, because that's an interesting item. Invasion. Now, Invasion is kind of an odd one. It's also odd with a lot of these items where they've added the item into the base game. Rearguard, in my mind, doesn't need any changes. If they make Rearguard better, I'm happy, because I've used Rearguard in a lot of builds recently. So feel free to increase the block on it. But I doubt they'd change Rearguard. Void Eye, Void Eye kind of serves the purpose, and it's niche, it's sometimes used, but it is just a niche item. It's not like something you'd generically apply like some of the previous items we've mentioned, so I think that should be left alone. Valkyries, if they increased the Onslaught duration, since Onslaught is now so accessible via Ascendancy, and they said that in comparison to Ascendancy, some of these items feel weak. If this gave Onslaught for 10 seconds or 15 seconds even, that might be a bit too much. It could be a legitimate option of, let's say your build uses 2 auras, like Val Grace, Val Haste. You put the gloves on, you run those 2, and you get free Onslaught from the gloves, if you can keep your auras up if you clear fast enough. You could just make that one change and keep the rest of the gloves pretty much the same. Maybe make the life a bit better if you want to, maybe increase the resistance if you want to. But that alone would be enough that, yeah, getting Onslaught from gloves with some resist, with +2, I could see that working. Pretty good. Skip down. Now, this is another interesting one. I think the flasks are much more likely to get reworks than this lot because the taming is already fine, and while these mini items could be made into super items, that feels weird to me, making a mini item a super item. Blood of the Karui, just make it heal for more, make it less janky. Maybe it heals you for half first and then half at the end. So it's like a seething and then another delayed super seething. That could work. Lavanga Spirit. I don't know. I don't know. It's just such an awkward flask. It sees use in some mine builds. They could just give it better usage, like just more uses. Other than that, I'm not really sure what you could do to it without keeping the like without completely warping it to something new and just designing a new flask. I'm not sure how you would change it. That being said, both of these flasks are so weak in comparison to the new flasks that you could do insane levels of change to them and they'd be completely fine. Taming doesn't need any work. Beric's Respite is one that I think could potentially see some changes. The Shock a nearby enemy, Ignite a nearby enemy. Both of those could be made more powerful. It could be Shock all nearby enemies, Ignite all nearby enemies, and it still wouldn't be that insane. It would still be a worse prolif. And in a world where double dipping is meant to be nerfed either next patch or the patch after they've announced it multiple times, that's what they're planning on, having an easier way of spreading Ignites, which is still situationally worse than prolif, because you have to kill the mob before it spreads. It doesn't instantly spread onto res. You could fuck with it, it'd be fine. I think that would be an easy way of changing it. Beric's Pass is just awkward. It's always been just an awkward item. Increased damage while ignited, increased armor while frozen. I mean, yeah, you could make it more gimmicky. You could just make it super, like 100% increased damage while ignited. Well, it's actually kind of easy to ignite yourself with the other mechanics, but they could go stupid on it and give it like 1,000 million armor while frozen. Because why would you ever freeze yourself? It's just blah. No. Increasing the leech amount on this is dangerous. Increasing the leech on it would obviously make it better. It would obviously make it see more use. But leech is such a controversial topic that touching leech values, in my mind, is just a big no-no. You don't want to make the base damage or life on it too powerful, because then you don't want these to be more powerful than this. I'm not sure about these ones. I don't know. Okay. They've already made this ridiculous. Vols is just problematic. They could make it even better, but no. Victario's Acuity is something that I would much rather see be brought up. Even though it's already just ridiculously powerful, it's a lot easier to generate frenzy charges and power charges these days with all the different ascendancies. This is the kind of thing which it directly relates to what they've established before. In the current game, this seems weaker. It's already a very powerful item, though. They could increase the multipliers you get, so increase the proj speed, increase the proj damage, or increase the chances to generate. They could put more stuff on it, but this is already insane. But considering how good they made this has potential in my mind. It fits into what they've already mentioned, and this is just a really good item. I would love to see it get more use. I always plan around them, but they're kind of awkward to get hold of. This deserves to be a chase item in my mind for what it does. But it is insane. Death Rush. Death Rush is terrible. So, yeah. I actually forgot what this item did. You could make this a lot better. It could just be you have Onslaught, and it would still be kind of bad. If this ring read as you have Onslaught, I don't think I'd use it. It's physical leech, which makes it awkward. If it was generic leech, it'd be a lot better, obviously. Getting a bunch of Chaos Res. Chaos Res I like, but most people play CI, so it's kind of meh. Having some Axio on the ring is good. The armor is like whatever. The armor is almost meaningless. They can make that % armor thing, so this is more attractive to armor-based builds. If they wanted to focus around armor, they could make it like a super armor ring and keep everything else the same, or they could focus on making the Onslaught better. But yeah. Horrendous. Very, very unlikely to see any of these changed. These are all very powerful items, but most of them are just awkward to get hold of. They could make this even more of a meme item, but no. Talisman. Talisman has issues just in like the fact that most of this stuff hasn't been added into the core game. All three of these are already good enough, so leave them as is. Rigwald's Crust, you could just make the damage values on it better. That'd really be the only way anyone would use it. Yeah, it's weak. You wouldn't even use it in a Cold to Fire build. As a 6% increased damage ring, you wouldn't bother using it. If they doubled those values, it'd be retarded, but maybe that's what they want to do. I don't know. Rigwald's Quills. Rigwald's Quills I could see getting some love. They just made a div card for it, so it has accessibility now. And while I really like it as an item, and it's an item that I always try and build around because Fork is one of my favorite mechanics, Fork is such a weak mechanic that you could make this infinitely better. Well, you could basically double the power of this, and it would still be kind of iffy in comparison to a draw mech. So the fact that it does have up to 50% increased proj damage, that's less than 100% proj damage that a draw mech has. Yes, it has free Fork, but Fork is the weakest of Fork, Chain, and Pierce, so that isn't that great. It doesn't have any life on it. It doesn't have any like armor or evasion. It has reduced projectile speed. The life gain on hit in the current meta is pretty meh. They could make this life gain on hit better. That'd be a nice way of buffing the item without making it ridiculous. They could take off the minus fire res, or they could ramp up some of these effects and make the fire res more noticeable. Because minus 10 fire res is kind of like, why is that even on there? It's just like, why is that there? If this was like a meaningful minus fire res, they could make everything else more powerful, and that'd overall be a much more interesting unique. Both of the Rigwald's weapons, they just don't really hit enough. They could just increase the raw damage on it, increase the damage when dual wielding, increase the block chance while dual wielding, but I don't know about these two. They're not mechanically that interesting. I'm not that sold on this. Warbands. Warbands has a lot of items, and basically all of these items pretty much could see some advancement in my mind. The only one which is kind of like fine as is Stepanard. Stepanard sees a lot of use, and that's good. I personally use Brine Rot Whalers in quite a few builds, and by that I've used it in the past because it gives physical damage, and it gives projectile damage, and it gives you unaffected by shocked ground. So in the builds which can make use of it, it's very good DPS with nice utility. The rings, all of them, I know I'm speeding up at this point just because there are so many for this one league. All of the rings are completely and utterly underwhelming, and if you super buff the rings, they could see use in golem builds, which would be nice. A lot of the other boots, they're all like, they're kind of good enough in the utility they do, and you either just make the base boot more powerful, which isn't that interesting, so but yeah. The shields, however, I think have a lot of potential. So all of these do things when you taunt, right? So this is gain mana when you hit a taunted enemy, gain life when you hit a taunted enemy, you gain onslaught on killing taunted enemies. These are all very interesting items that promote using war cries, which promote actively doing things, and that's good. It promotes an active playstyle because you need to war cry first to taunt the mobs. It also has some synergy with champion, with inbuilt champion taunt. All three of those war cry shields could be made a lot more powerful. Make it you have onslaught for a much longer duration. Have it so you get a stupid amount of life, a stupid amount of mana, or just increase the base value of the shields, increase up the AoE it gives. I don't know. These are all items which have potential, but none of them individually scream out to me for Warbands. God, we still have a few left. Torment is all fine. Scald is fine. Bruce's Sled Sprinkler is just a boring weapon. You could make it super against ignited enemies, but that alone, no one is yelling for this to be brought back. But sure. The Rat Cage is an interesting item. It's kind of like a mini combs, but has major downsides. They could make it even better to keep the downside there, but unless they added something completely new to the Rat Cage or super embraced the meme of like crazy amounts of life but a crazy drawback, I don't think it will ever be used outside of niche. So none of these really scream out to me. Rampage. These are interesting. Rampage is a fun mechanic. All of these gloves are individually pretty powerful, but hard to get hold of, which is pretty important. And kind of good enough, and if you made them too good, they would be BIS in just every build. So if they're doing tier 0 based items like they did with the ring, sure, make these better. Otherwise, I would leave these well alone, but maybe make them more accessible, because they are fun to play with. I think that's a pretty fair way of assessing it. I feel like we've already covered this one, sorry. And we've already covered this one, sorry. So, that is it. I had to record this video twice because I missed out half of the League unique, so sorry for that little overlap at the end there. I'm Tarke, the Diablo music is really loud, and there'll be another video after this, talking about Patreon. I'm Tarke, have a good day, bye bye.